Hello, my name is ScienceBeard, and today I'll be talking about an article in the DailyMail, which I'm not a huge fan of in the first place, but, occasionally they have stories which are interesting. And one of the things, though, that they did was they reported about this person who to organize a play date for her daughter in the lockdown period, and got roundly criticized for it on social media. But actually what they did do was they reproduced a rant on Facebook from 2017 by this woman. I will not name her, although the name is on the screen if you can read it. I will call her Veronica. So Veronica basically produced this rant on Facebook, and that's actually my target. And then I will go on to one of the websites, which is an anti-vax website, and I will look at that as well. So my initial idea was to debunk the Facebook post, which came with the article detailing why this woman, like so many people, is a COVIDiot. According to the Mail, that, I have no love for the Daily Mail, as I said, and their fear-mongering is among the finest in the media. However, I then noticed a reference to this website, learntherisk.org, so I'm going to quickly debunk the claims or implications made by Veronica as Facebook posting, and then move on to learn the risk. So this is the what you got criticized for, and there is the Facebook post. And if you want to look it up, you can do. I've highlighted a couple of things here. So first thing is, let's risk death, paralysis, SIDS, encephalitis, seizures, spelled wrongly, GBS, and many other life-threatening deadly side effects because, measles. So this is the idea that you get, like, from the measles vaccine, you get all of these potential things, and almost, completely guaranteed that you will have them. Now, SIDS, I'm not. I have to say, I didn't look that up, and GBS, but I have looked up the side effects from both from measles and the vaccine. So the first thing to say is, as with all things medical, there's always a risk, and I will talk a little bit about that later. In fact, life is full of risks and very few certainties. The first claim I'm going to address is that measles is harmless, and this is an implied claim. Okay, so the CDC identifies children younger than 5 years, adults older than 20, pregnant women, and people with compromised immune systems as more at risk from measles. So what are the consequences? Death from measles between 1985 and 1992 was 0.2% of the cases. So out of 1,000 people, 2 would die on average. But pre-vaccination, how many people got it? Well, nearly everybody as a childhood disease. Given that the under 5s are particularly at risk, this is bad news. So if we didn't vaccinate for measles, out of 1 million people, 2,000 people would likely die. Doesn't sound a lot if you are a sociopath. These would be mainly children. Many more would be left with the other consequences of measles, deafness and brain damage. But, it's just measles. So the next claim is, that's right, the illness that can be cured by vitamin A treatment. To be clear, vitamin A can be a risk factor, and shots are sometimes given, particularly when your diet indicates that you may not have a sufficiently high level of vitamin A. However, vitamin A does not cure measles, and in their article, Vitamin A for Treating Measles in Children, D'Souza and D'Souza from the National Centre for Epidemiology and Population Health at the Australian National University in Canberra write in 2002 that measles is a leading cause of childhood morbidity and mortality. How is this possible, and how does this factor in vitamin A? Well, the WHO recommends giving vitamin A to children in areas where vitamin A deficiency may be present. So what did they find? We did not find evidence that a single dose of 2000 IU of vitamin A per day, given in oil-based formulation in areas with low case fatality, was associated with reduced mortality among children with measles. However, there was evidence that the same dose given for 2 days was associated with a reduced risk of overall mortality and pneumonia-specific mortality. That's far from curing it, I would say. I get it. Veronica, looking for appropriate peer-reviewed research is hard. Reading is hard. Understanding said research is also hard. Much easier to go on bullshitty websites which present you with a misleading summary of misinterpreted sentences on websites used for quote mining. The next claim is
Measles was never eradicated in 2000. There were a reported 86 cases. So this is a reference to the US having been designated elimination status for measles in 2000. However, this never applied to the UK, where Moronica actually resides. The UK achieved the status in 2017. However, this was short-lived since a lot of youngsters hadn't been vaccinated during the MMR autism fiasco. You know, the Andrew Wakefield study, which was widely criticized for its low sample size and selection of participants, and finally withdrawn because he had not declared links to single vaccine manufacturers. So there was an uptick in the cases of measles, exacerbated by the fact that recently qualified GPs hadn't seen real-life measles cases and so didn't recognize it initially. The worst outbreak that was reported was probably in South Wales. The BBC reported a measles outbreak in South Wales in March 2018. Funnily enough, the sort of precautions people should have taken then will sound very familiar to people now: social distancing and self-isolation. So, the MMR can spread measles, mumps and rubella. Well, what can I tell you? If you Google it, you find that nobody agrees with that. MMR cannot infect non-vaccinated people. Are you thinking of polio? Because there is evidence for limited spread in hotspots, and we're talking about single cases. I mean, cases in the ones and twos. I probably shouldn't feed that monster, though. It is likely, in my opinion, that people who think that this is the case probably look at outbreaks, which is usually followed by an appeal for vaccination, particularly of children, and they then put the cart before the horse. But in any case, the CDC says that once you are immunized, that's it for life. The other thing is that anti-vaxxers also don't understand the basic science. No surprise here. The measles vaccine is about 93% effective, which means that despite the effort to directly make your body acquainted with a weak or dead version of the virus, for whatever reason, some people don't become immune. In medicine, 93% though is blinking fantastic. Think of something else which works 93% of the time. That also means that if you have two lots, you have a 3% chance of getting measles when exposed to it because you haven't developed full immunity. However, you are much more likely to get a mild version of the disease. Remember that if you are over 20, you are in a risk group and you're less likely to infect others if you've had two shots. And here's the thing that makes science science. We are not completely sure why this is, and we are not afraid to say so. However, for some people, it is much easier to believe that there is a conspiracy involving pharma companies and governments, not even that, but changing governments of all colors, and researchers, doctors, nurses, everyone involved, all over the world. Yeah, sure. So the next claim is recent measles and mumps outbreaks have been among highly, sometimes 100% in vaccinated populations. That's an easy one. As I just said, no population is ever 100% vaccinated against anything. Bridget Kuhn wrote in the Journal of the American Medical Association on measles vaccine exemptions that a 2018 outbreak of measles in California that infected 6 people may have been driven in part by children who received broad medical exemptions to measles vaccinations, and that a wave of US measles outbreaks fueled by unvaccinated children has led to concerns about lax vaccination requirements. Most recently, there were 70 confirmed cases of measles, including 61 in unvaccinated individuals in Washington state, where philosophical exemptions are allowed. In the affected county, only 78% of children aged 6 through to 18 years have received the recommended 2 doses of the measles vaccine, well below the 93 to 95% needed to maintain herd immunity, according to the World Health Organization. So many cases have been won in court, rewarding vaccine-injured families awards and settlements for the injury and or death from the MMR. Now, this is actually true in parts. Science Mag published an article entitled Vaccines on Trial. US courts separated fact from fiction. In it, Meredith Wortman writes, the vaccine court's data show that bona fide vaccine injuries are rare. For every million vaccine doses eligible for compensation that were distributed in the decade beginning in 2006, the court compensated 1 injury victim. Depending on the gravity of the disease in question, receiving a vaccine is orders of magnitude less dangerous than staying unvaccinated. The tetanus vaccine that Durant received, Durant is a lawyer who basically got a tetanus injection and then had severe side effects, causes a life-threatening allergic reaction in at most 0.0006% of people who get the shot. The US case fatality rate from tetanus, by contrast, is 13.2%. The next sentence is from a medical professional saying 1 injury is of course too many. However, here's the thing. While it is regrettable that there are side effects from vaccines, at the same time you can die without a chance for compensation from the actual disease. And this is far more likely than side effects from a vaccine. In the US, you also have a compensation culture where outrageous compensations get paid for stupid things. Let me be clear that this area isn't one of them, but let me be equally clear here. More people are likely to win compensation than have had injury from vaccines. It is a legal industry. We're sort of familiar with it here in the UK now as well. And it is still better to have a chance at getting some money with which you can make choices about adjustments to your house, say, than you just get brain damage because your parents were idiots and have no recourse to anything. I get that it's the trolley problem. You have to take an action and you will feel responsible. But for many reasons, it is better to take that action and not just for yourself and your offspring. This is already a longer video than I thought, so we'll keep this one short. 1 death in the US in the last decade was declared measles. This point just shows that MMR works. A measles outbreak, like the one in California, had maybe 100 people in it. No deaths is a likely outcome given the mortality rate and the fact that the outbreak probably led to massive medical awareness in the community. So away from the US and Europe, how many people die of measles? And this ties in with what I said about the Australian study. Well, again, in an article I cited earlier, D'Souza and D'Souza said it was a leading cause in child mortality. So where? In 2018, 140,000 people died as cases surged, say the WHO. In 2018, the most affected countries, the countries with the highest incidence rate of the disease, were the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Liberia, Madagascar, Somalia, and the Ukraine. These 5 countries accounted for almost half of the measles cases worldwide. Who are the poorest countries? Well, none of them are particularly rich, most towards the bottom end of the spectrum, depending on the list you look at. Okay, so that's a crude correlation, but it shows that reasonably well-off countries, A, vaccinate, and B, have a healthcare system which prevents more deaths than from rampant measles, which, remember, is almost a certainty to catch as a child. I won't even dignify the last line here with a comment. So, no... okay, so I will do that. No country given, and as I just said, 140,000 dead in the world despite massive vaccination in most countries, and even if there are 180 deaths from MMR, which I find hard to believe, unless it is from an underlying factor or wrong administration of the vaccine, I don't know, maybe directly injected into the spine, who knows. By contrast, human error accounts for about 22,000 deaths through medication and treatment errors in the NHS alone. Should we get rid of the NHS then? Well, no. The best way to deal with it is fix it. Better training, more staff, more monitoring, fewer horrendously overworked staff who are prone to tiredness and make errors. So, this is the single most stupid claim here. Where there is a risk, there must be a choice. You already have a choice. Barely 70% of children get their second vaccine. Nobody turns up at your door and forces you to have it. If other people decide, based on evidence, that they don't want your unvaccinated children in schools or a daycare setting, that is their choice. After all, you want people to have a choice. There's a real danger that anti-vaxxers become a threat to public health. At the moment, lazy and dopey parents still benefit from herd immunity in most cases. When that goes away, you get outbreaks, like the one in South Wales. I wonder whether, if we still had smallpox, we would be having this discussion. And you know, this is what I taught in year 8 in schools when my students were 12, and they got it. I presented other evidence, such as historical evidence as well, and let them ask what they wanted. So this is why you, Moronica, are a moron. I'll see you in the next video, and sorry that I lied, because I will address Learn the Risk in a separate video. See you later.